recording. Welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. We'll wait for a few more people to join the meeting. We do have everybody muted just for the presentation portion of the evening, but you can give me a thumbs up on your screen if you can hear everything okay. Great. Just a couple quick housekeeping items. We do have you muted. You're welcome to leave your video on or turn it off. If you're having poor bandwidth or connectivity, sometimes helps to turn the video feed off. We do have the chat open and you can submit questions during Ron's presentation. And then afterwards, there will be an opportunity to add more questions to the chat or use the raise hand feature, which should be located on your control panel, and we'll call on you if you'd like to ask a question. Just a couple little upcoming events. We are really pleased that we're having our winter carnivals, Art on the Trails scavenger hunt again. And that's just gone live, and it will be up through the 13th. Please don't go out on Saturday, though. It's looking quite cold and windy, and we don't want anyone getting frostbite on the trails. But Sunday will be a beautiful day for exploring the hunt. And all that information is on our website under our events. And I'm also really pleased that we are once again offering the On Belonging in Outdoor Spaces free lecture series. These will both be on Zoom, and we're going to be featuring this year Claudia Foxtree on February 22nd and Jose Gonzalez on March 29th. And you can sign up online for both of those lectures. It's a really great series highlighting people of color and their experiences in outdoor spaces, and starting conversations about making sure that everybody feels included and welcome in outdoor spaces. And we've got lots of other cool programming in the works for the spring, but these are just two that I wanted to share with you tonight. And then I'd like to introduce our speaker for this evening, Ron McAdow. Ron is a wonderful local expert in history and natural history as well. He's authored several books about the area, most recently a guide to Mount Misery and an illustrated edition of Emerson's Nature. They're for sale at Something Special if you want to shop local in Lincoln. Ron also served as the executive director of the Sudbury Valley Trustees. And I also wanted to just give a quick shout out this spring through the the Lincoln Sudbury Regional High School and Concord Carlisle Regional High School community education. He's offering a 3-part course on the Fairhaven Bay area, history and natural history. And the third class in that series is a on the ground boots tour of the area. He'll take you for a hike. Sorry. So you can find that. The newsletter just went out for that, and you can find the information online. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing here, and I will invite Ron to share his slides.
Well, thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm going to try to squeeze you all into my study here and we'll get back so you can look over my shoulder and see some pictures looking forward to showing you. I became interested in using motion triggered cameras at the very end of the last century when I went on a trekking course. It was led by an expert tracker at Oxbow National Wildlife Refuge. he showed us animal sign. It's not so easy to find actual footprints, you know, it was not perfect snowy conditions for that. So we were looking at other kinds of signs, which involve a lot of scat, you know what I mean by that. And also he showed us a place where river otters had gone from the Nashua River over to a pond, and they had left a scent mound, and it looked pretty yucky. And I thought, I'd love to see the otters. I guess I mentioned that somehow the subject came up, and the refuge manager told me about this technology that hunters were using, motion triggered cameras. And so I looked it up, you know, we're online, and sure enough, and it wasn't terribly expensive, but I wasn't ready to fund a new hobby. But I knew about the Sudbury Foundation, and I thought, I made the case in a little grant proposal. I said, why don't you buy me this equipment and I'll volunteer my time, and I will make the public funds this conservation land. But when you walk on the conservation land, you're not going to see the animals we're most interested in. So maybe with this equipment, I can show the public some of what their investment in conservation land goes to support. And amazingly, they bought it. And so I got some equipment, and in the year 2000 got started. So now I'm going to share my screen and start my slide presentation. And I'm not seeing what I expected to see. Oh, hold on here. Oh, now I know why. Okay. So this is what an actual otter scent mound looks like. You can see why I thought it would be nicer to see the otter. The equipment I bought, I'll get my highlighter here, a little laser pointer. This was the bad old days. We were using digital cameras, but the digital camera batteries in those days wouldn't work for this kind of use. So this is a film camera. Well, this is the film camera right here, and this is the motion detector, and there's a cable that connects the two. That was the equipment I started out with in the spring of 2000. There was a learning curve. There were floods. The Nashua River goes up and down. It turns out that pine branches waving in the breeze will trip. So I have 36 copies of the same picture that were all triggered by, it was film. So I take the roll of film to the store, and then I, anxiously get back this pictures. And if they're all the same, it's kind of disappointing. Also, I learned the hard way that if you handle the equipment with greasy fingers, like you've been eating French fries or something, who knows, that's attractive to the animals, and they will turn the cable into a sort of a copper pasta. But one day I opened the package of film, and there was an animal. It was a beaver at night. I was excited. And I started getting some results. This was a buck in June. I've never don't know that I've ever spotted one in the velvet like this, but this fellow posed for his picture. Now you see the eye shine. This is a white flash. It's an old-fashioned camera, film camera. Flash is white. It reflects off the back of the animal's eyes and gives it that alien type appearance, which certainly detracts from the photograph, but that's the way it was and still is. Usually if it's at nighttime and the flash is on. It's a mink. And sometimes it's exciting if you get something happening. So I had a camera at a place where a heron was fishing, and it actually came up with a fish in front of the camera. So that's always great when something happens other than the animal just passing by. of course, most places you put a camera, you can leave it there for a year and animals won't pass by at all. If you leave it on a human trail, we know the animals use those, but you can't really leave a motion triggered camera on one of those trails for obvious reasons. So a challenge of using that type of equipment is to find a place that is a natural funnel, or in this case, it's not a natural funnel, but this is an underpass under the railroad that runs along the Nashua River there. And I thought maybe animals go through that. And meanwhile, it was not on a human trail. So I said, I left a camera there. Now, I learned very early, or I formed the hypothesis early, still good subject for testing and research, that raccoons will have a daily route or nightly route. And this one seemed to come every night and look up at the camera as though getting its picture taken had become part of its daily routine as it went through the tunnel. I've never seen a lactating raccoon, so this has always been a picture that was exciting. And then I got you don't usually, a lot of pictures show like nothing, or they show a little piece of something, or in this case, the back end of something that I thought might be the back end of a fisher, and that would have been exciting. So I thought maybe it'll come back, and it did come back. So still not the whole animal, but enough of an animal to say, yep, it's a it's a fisher. So that was pretty cool. And you get a few of these, but I always leave a sign so that they can, so it explains who I am and what I'm doing. And people have been, on the whole, very courteous about it, and never regretted having this picture of this hominid. Then, on to the great happiness of the fish and wildlife people. We're seeing bobcats. I mean, I'm not seeing them, but people are seeing them and taking pictures of bobcats here in Lincoln. But in the year 2000, the fish and wildlife people said, we thought we had them, but they were really happy to get proof. Now you can see my learning curve is still here. I've got the camera pointed out over this bank, so the camera is focusing in the distance. That's no good. You learn not to do that. But in terms of the artistic of it, but how satisfying to get this wildcat at Oxbow. And in another location at Oxbow. Now this one, you can't see the facial ruff. So people say, how do you know it's a bobcat? And I take this as a response to that. The athleticism of these creatures is, well, they're really wild cats. Now, a fox in the snow, what a color they are. Oh, never get tired of them. A whole lot of little bitty creatures. They're mice all over the forest at night, busy little guys. And in the daytime, a million chipmunk pictures I have. But I won't show you any more of them tonight. This was a good one though. This was a flying squirrel. Look at those eyes bulging out. The light gathering power there is amazing. Now here's one where you can see the too bad about the retina reflection, but still great to see a beautiful gray fox, healthy looking gray fox. Now, I know Norman Gwynn are in the audience, so I don't know if did we get in. I should have asked you before. Did we get any ruffed grouse? I haven't. I used to look every year at the Christmas bird count for the ruffed grouse where I took this picture. Haven't, not a track, not a sign of a grouse for years, but back in the early aughts, they were still around, and I just love this photograph because it shows the protective coloration so well, and also shows the whole animal, which is very rare, and it's almost sharp. So this is a triumph, my ruffed grouse, and I'm not seeing them anymore. I used to see ruffed grouse tracks everywhere. Finally, the guys who got the whole thing started, river otters. I hadn't had any, but then I found a place where I could. Now here you see I've got the camera pointed at the bank, so it's in focus, and the otters were in a crew, and this charismatic fellow kind of mugged and posed to my joy. So that was all really good. Now this site was back in Sudbury on the refuge there. I had a special use permit to use at the refuge. So this fisher crossed from left to right, but then it turned around and came back. It could smell something about this equipment. I had more than one camera there. So here it is smelling the motion detector. And then, now I don't understand why it did this, but I posted this picture online, and one of my poker buddies sent me an email. I said, Ron, does this mean that the fisher has a picture of you on his website? Now, about this time, I was taking on my responsibilities as Sudbury Valley trustees, and I was kind of wrapping up this phase of my hobby and passing up. But before I did that, I tried to get artistic and have the light come from the side and the picture taken in front. And I was somewhat successful at that with that equipment where the flash could be detached from the camera. So in 2003, I became executive director of Sudbury Valley Trustees. And then a couple years later, the town of Concord was told by Mass Highways that there were going to be, as a safety measure, Jersey barriers put right down the middle of Route 2. And Concord said, we should have, that's going to make it really hard on the wildlife. Why don't we have some underpasses? And Mass Highways said, okay. So I was aware of that and interested in it, and took this picture of a place where they were going to be putting, and when they started construction, Betsy and I went out, and she doesn't like to have her picture taken usually, but she was willing to pose for scale because the tunnels that they put in are different sizes, as you can see. Then here came the Jersey barriers right down the middle, and this shows the locations of, so here's Sudbury River, and the three that we did research on, which I'm about to explain what I mean by that, are here. And then a fourth one that came later is probably one that makes a big difference to Lincoln wildlife, or the creatures that want to get under Route 2, because it's right here, and you can see our rich habitat that is connected through that. Here's what it looks like now. And that was some years later that they put that in, but this is from the Crosby Pond side of it. Now, the research we were going to do was very much like my grant that I started this with, which was to say, well, is anything going to use these tunnels? So Lydia Rogers of Concord and I were co-chairs of the Wildlife Passage Task Force. We got ourselves formally designated by the town, and we put, she's a tracker, one of the keeping in the old, I don't know if they're still going, but they used to call it keeping track. And there's an idea called a track bed. This was news to me. Some of you probably know all about track beds, but I didn't. And the idea is that you get if you prepare a certain surface, you can get a better footprint. It's this kind of thing that got left in the track bed. And this is Dan Stimson, my colleague at SVT, who took over from me. He's a better technologist than I am. He took over from the whole motion triggered camera stuff, moved it right into the digital age, and operated the equipment and the tunnels. And right away, we started getting results in the tunnel. Here's a weasel, raccoon, and it's always nice when there's an interaction, even if it's kind of not that. So funny, the raccoon on the left started one way and turned, had that encounter and came back the way he went. Now, this is the tunnel beside Sudbury River. Why is a beaver walking through the tunnel instead of swimming in the river? I don't know, but that's what it chose to do this night. Deer use the tunnels all the time. And by all the time, I mean, even when the river came up, they just kept coming, even if they were swimming. And sometimes the hominids use the tunnels also. Little ones and big ones. There's a possum. Now this raccoon is going to show you something here. There's they're marking a scent in front of this camera. For some reason, they decided to do scent marking. And so not only did the raccoon do it, but the fishers who were using it marked the same place with the same kind of scent gland. Theirs is right above their tail, I guess. Now this is a sad story. Well, if you're the skunk, it's sad. So these fishers were going back and forth, and they seemed to be feeding young on one side of the tunnel and hunting on the other side. So here's the skunk going toward us, and here's the skunk going back the other direction a little bit later. Fishers have the ability, or have they eat skunks. Red fox, coyote. Dan wrote up for Mass Wildlife. He wrote up the success of our project there. So a couple more years went by, and I got a new house. We moved to Lincoln and got a new house, and I had this compost bin that the lid kept coming off. So I got a digital camera. I finally moved myself into the digital age of motion triggered photography, and discovered, nobody will be surprised, that it was raccoons that were getting into my compost. Then we noticed out on Fire Pond, we're near Fire Pond, there was a big red spot, and it turns out, now I'm about to show you a deer carcass, so if that's going to bother you, you might not want to look at this. The coyotes had brought down a deer. Okay, the color part's gone. There were coyote tracks all over the place in the ice. Nancy Soulette and I talked about whether it was for sure it was coyote or not. I don't really know, but probably was. Anyway, now I never used bait in my another phrase for this activity is photo trapping. You know, if you use bait, you're going to attract animals to the bait, yes, but then you won't find out what was using that trail to begin with. I'm doing this out of curiosity about what's going on out there, and I'm not looking. However, if nature's going to put the bait there, I'm not above putting a camera pointing at it. And so out when my new camera was fairly new, and the red foxes came and scavenged the carcass. Sometimes there were two of them, but it turns out three was a crowd. So this is another one of those pictures where you've got an encounter going on. The third red fox was clearly not welcome. Look at the ears of put back of the one that's growling at the third. The red foxes were nervous. Why were they nervous? Because of course it's a coyote kill, and coyotes are around, and the coyotes came too. So the coyote struck that same pose in the same place as the red fox, and I used Photoshop and made this composite so that you could, because I wanted to see, and now you can see the difference in stature between these two animals, and you can see why red foxes don't want anything to do with a coyote. Ravens came, and then snow came. So that got to be the end of that particular chapter with the deer carcass. A couple more years went by, and so this is a ramp that I used at the edge of the pond to launch my canoe. Still do, but a tree's fallen on it and it's all crooked. But anyway, a pile of sticks appeared beside the ramp, and it kept growing. Now, as you might know, Fire Pond is managed every few years. They lower the water level. So this is a time when the water level had been lowered. You can see the part of the bank that's right here is usually underwater, and the water would come right across here. Well, the beavers have a tunnel here. They often build tunnels in the banks where there's a high bank, and the beavers, instead of they wanted to build themselves a tunnel, a way to get safely to their bank so that no wolves could get them or anything. So they started building this, and naturally, this was great. I put a camera there to see if I could get the beavers actually working on their dwelling. This is the angle from the camera. You can see the muddy guck that they are piling up. And I got a lot of results for that. I'm going to show a sequence from the snow because it makes it easy to see these dark animals. I was so impressed with their attention to detail. They look so dumb, and yet they seem to have an idea about where each stick should go. And sometimes they would change their mind and look at it and move it to a different place, like it was very carefully. Now I want to show you this again because this sequence reminds me of something. So this person in front, say this is my wife in the kitchen at the holidays, hard at work. And I come in from the living room and I'm looking for a job or pretending to look for a job. But, oh, she's got everything under control. Guess I'll go back and sit by the fire. And then she hears it's too quiet in there and she looks around. And where did he go? So that was the beaver episode. And you can imagine when all this stuff freezes, what a good adaptation that is for beavers in wolf country, or how difficult it's going to be for any creature to dig into this. A couple years later, a swan died in the pond, and it was kind of lying there, left alone for a long time. But after a couple of weeks in the freezing weather, a red-tailed hawk found it, and once that happened, animals started visiting it. So I put my camera out there, and I was surprised and pleased to get another encounter. These two hawks disagreed about who had the rights to this dead swan, and that one won. But at night, other creatures came. So the coyote must have been awfully hungry. I'm sure it's mostly feathers that they seem to, adding roughage to their diet. Thin time in the winter. And a really pretty fox came along. Here it comes. The foxes sometimes were more or less with the raccoons. And to my surprise, they seemed to defer to the raccoons, so that you could see them, their eyeballs sitting out in the back, waiting for the raccoons to go away. But they were in the vicinity at the same time. So it was interesting questions about the relationship of those two species. Now, Kathy Martin over at Beaver Pond has been at about the same time, about 2019, she started doing this and has been doing it. So here's a great picture of a fisher that she did, and I'm going to turn on a series of videos. She got a bobcat. You can see the date stamp down there, 2019. So that's pretty exciting. And in broad daylight, the fisher. This silvery look is what you get when the camera says, I need to use my flash, but there's still daylight, natural light in the background. So it makes a pretty effect, I think. Now here's the deer family she got. I love the end of this. Well, this is a great piece of video. That friskiness of this guy, and it's and then says, oh, nursing, that's a good idea. We'll all do that. And the tail wagging and the joy of these little guys, it's not a worry in the world. The upper raccoon here does have a worry, doesn't think this deep snow is such a great idea. You know, raccoons will hole up, I guess, for long periods of time. And that second one clearly wasn't really interested in the deep snow. Then count them. So now you see four coyotes. They're doing something in the snow, and here comes some more. So she got a whole pack of coyotes, did Kathy, over at Beaver Pond. Well, that's excellent. And that's a really crisp still that she has there. That brings me up to where I've been working now. I've been, so this, what you see here, you're going to see a lot of it. It's a beaver dam in Well Meadow. Now, some of you know exactly where Well Meadow is. It's that extension off of Fairhaven Bay that if you're taking the trail around from Lincoln, from Pleasant Meadow, and you're trying to get to the right boathouse and the trail along Fairhaven Bay, you have to go all the way around Well Meadow. And I've been preparing material about Greater Fairhaven Bay for the course that Brent mentioned, and so I've wanted to make a study of whatever I could study there. So I've had my camera there. So this raccoon, you can see that raccoon in the background. It came right up to the camera, and then it tumped the camera over. So once in a while that happens, the tripod, but ordinarily nothing bothers the tripod. I just put it back up. But here's the beaver working on this dam. You can see the water level, the upstream level is on the right side, and the downstream level is, and there's a big difference between the two levels in this picture. Here, the upper pond has gone down a little bit. Red fox got its picture taken in the daytime, which is nice. And you can see the fresh work. Raccoons. Here, the hypothesis was that the beaver dam trail that animals would use and that would not use, I mean, that people would not use. And so that has turned out to be all kinds true. It's been worked out well. And all kinds of things have turned up there, including this heron that had a whole series of pictures of itself taken as it waded along there. A deer browsing the edge. A lot of raccoon traffic. Here's a weasel. Not many weasels. And wood ducks. I think that Well Meadow it might be a good place for wood ducks to go when they're molting. You know, I guess there's a period at which they can't fly, or they fly poorly, or anyway, there were a lot of wood ducks there for a while. And river otters, my old friends, river otters, turned up there. Here's a closer picture of this fellow looking right at the camera. This is otter scat. In case you know anyone who needs otter scat, I can show them where they can collect quite a bit of it, because it turns out that river otters create what's called a latrine, and they like to deposit their scat there. They apparently also like to hang out there. Because this group of otters has been very present. Now you can see, if you look at the date stamp down below here, this is last October, and wood ducks it's hard not to take and share pictures of wood ducks. It's just unbelievable how they look. River otters swimming around. I like that silvery color. So here's one of those where there's still there's a little morning light here at 7 in the morning in November. You can see some ice forming, and this camera, the otters and the coyotes could see the red flash. Oh, so I didn't explain. So in the film camera, it's a white flash, but the idea was if you use it, and the reason that these pictures are black and white is the idea is you use a red flash, and the animals are not as sensitive to that. And but some of the animals still definitely notice it, and it's aversive to them. So I eventually, I got last fall, I got a camera that claimed that they couldn't see it, and I think they see it's responding to the light from the camera, and it's kind of taking a turn. Now, this is the new camera, and the otters didn't seem to mind that a bit. So this is end of December, and there was on the ice. That was a fisher, and I shouldn't have stopped it because, but I figured out what to do. I have to go back. I was gonna, the fisher just kind of moves across, and I can start, from here, I can control where we see it. Okay. Let's find that fisher. Now, I'm not sure what this is going to work or not, but we'll see. Now, I'll try once more. No, isn't going to work. So I'm sorry, we'll have to see the whole thing again. But it's only a couple of minutes long. The snow is nice because it makes everything show up, but it turns out, as you'll see, that the otters seem to like to scratch themselves in the snow. Now look at how much of the dam is out of the water here. You can see that the level on one side is, there goes the fisher, and then a coyote came. The fish, I've only had one fisher, and it just did a pass through. The coyotes do just pass throughs, but the raccoons like to pose and have their picture taken, and strike attitudes. It's good. Thank you, raccoons. This one looks well fed. I suppose it's all fur. Then, so now we're at the end of the breeding season where the family group is still together. And imagine with my, it was otters that got me interested in this to begin with. I never dreamed that I would have a camera where it would get groups of otters playing like this. And these videos give me a great deal of pleasure to see, as I hope they do you. And it's fabulous serendipity that the group is hanging out at the beaver dam. Look at the stomach on this one. I think maybe this is the mother otter of the group, and that she is pregnant. But I don't know, don't see many pregnant otters, but it looks like quite a stomach. Now, here we are we're now only really very recently in the wet weather. You can see there's still plenty of dam sticking up from the water, but it is raining and you can hear it. It doesn't seem to bother the otters. Now, look at the dam. The water on the left side is the same level as on the right side, and there's an awful lot of water. And here at night, now that beaver apparently is acting like a cat or a dog, scratching over its scat before it goes back in the water. Keep your eye on the dam. The dam is shrinking so that you can see a raccoon disappearing away. Now the dam is underwater and the raccoons still use. So and it's deeper and they're still using it. So this is only a few days ago. That's an otter on the left, up to something on the side of the camera. Here comes more otters. And And so that's very recently, and you can see how much fun I'm having with this, and I hope you enjoyed seeing it. It's this is what it looked like yesterday, that spot. So the dam that you were seeing goes right here that the creatures were crossing, and the ice made it very pretty. Now I noticed that the river's headed back down, so maybe the dam will come back into visibility. So that's my story.
Wow, thank you, Ron. That was phenomenal. It's just the image quality from the first ones that you showed us to those otter videos is just incredible. So thank you for sharing that. And it's especially cool to see ones that were taken just a few days ago. So everybody, I'm going to allow participants to unmute themselves. So feel free to put any questions into the chat, or you can raise your hand on the screen and we can invite you to unmute yourself and ask any questions that you may have. Give folks a few minutes to digest. Sheila.
Hi, yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions because I know nothing about this. Does the camera broadcast to your house, to your phone, or do you have to go and collect it in person? You do?
I think that you can get the equipment that will transmit images by radio, but I'm not at that level of investment in it, and I love to walk anyway, and so I go get it. And so in every case, whether it was a roll of film or one of the little cards, you know, for the the digital images, I have to go take it out of the camera. And also, sometimes the camera has, here's, you know, the little cards that we use. Sometimes the camera did get tipped over from time to time, or the batteries run out. The batteries last a long time now, even in the digital cameras. But in this cold weather, they won't last terribly long. They need to be changed. So, so I'm going to the equipment. You're still muted.
Oh,
I know you have
Sheila,
another question.
Is it in a waterproofed case? Because
It's
when my husband and I
waterproof
used to snorkel, pardon?
It doesn't mind rain or snow.
Really?
I don't think you would want to immerse it very long. It's not.
Okay.
It's not an underwater camera, but
Okay.
but it's perfectly weather tight. They have.
Thank you.
great, thanks, Sheila. We've got a question from Carol in the chat. Do you expect to see animals on today? Well, I guess into Saturday when it's going to be very cold. Do you notice trends in the weather and animal appearances?
I do notice over the years. For a while, I was working out at Summer Star Wildlife Refuge or Summer Star Wildlife Habitat, and the traffic in the winter went way down compared to, say, spring or fall. It's just been enormously good luck that in the winter the traffic at that beaver dam has held up so strongly. And yes, for this, I'll be surprised if there's anything moving around in the frigid conditions tomorrow, but I've been surprised before, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you never know. Gwen.
Ron, this was absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. I love the variety of where you showed the camera under the tunnels under Route 2, as well as the other places where you've set it up. Do you know if anybody now is monitoring the animal traffic under Route 2?
Well, after several years of operation, we kind of decided mission accomplished and stopped calling ourselves the Wildlife Passage Task Force. But Lydia is fascinated with the whole thing. So I'm not going to tell you that Lydia is not doing something, but I'm not aware. I'm no longer involved and haven't for years had any involvement with monitoring the traffic through the wildlife passages. Don't know. You want to take an interest in nature, Gwen. I think you would enjoy it.
Okay.
Thanks, Gwen. All right. We do have time for a few more questions if anyone has any. Otherwise, we'll give people a few minutes to think. Otherwise, we can sign off a few minutes early.
Well, I'll ask one more then. So
Great.
Ron, I think it was last year, somebody sent me a video of an ermine, which is, I guess, what you call a weasel that turns white in the winter. Have you ever seen any of those around here? I mean,
No.
maybe, but
I haven't. All the weasel pictures that I've taken or seen have had brown backs. And I'm not sure if that is fully understood by the wildlife scientists which, there are the two species, there's the short-tailed and the long-tailed.
Mhm.
And for a while I thought that ermines were one kind or the other, but I don't think it's that simple, and I don't think it's necessarily fully understood why some of them are, clearly in the more northern areas where there's more snow, the white in the winter has greater survival value. But I don't think that totally correlates either. But I'm interested in that question, but I don't know a great deal about it.
Great, Jeff.
Oh, thank you, Ron. That was wonderful. I think I know the answer to this question, but there are no wildlife corridors / tunnels east of Tracy's, I assume, right? On Route 2?
Well, I asked Michelle and Stacy whether they were aware of any, and we don't think there are any east of the one that I showed you.
Yeah.
It was, we think they're all in Concord. Concord says they now have 6. So I guess they originally were going to build 4. I guess they might have added 2 more, including the one that I showed you that has the date 2016 on it, which is 9 years after the first go around. So, but I'm not aware of additional ones. I was wondering about that myself, and looking at the map, there are several places where in Lincoln where Route 2 goes over a wetland, and so there's clearly and there's a stream going through, so there's clearly a culvert, but the culverts they can use are way smaller than are really that you would do for a wildlife. And besides that, the contours have to be right for them to be able to put that passage in. And then there has to be habitat on both sides. So you couldn't, as I drove along Route 2 yesterday in Lincoln, I was thinking about that very subject and looking, and the highway goes down almost to the level of the wetland. So they couldn't put one there. So even if we push the next time they were building Route 2, that doesn't mean that there's a good place for one necessarily.
Hi, Ron. So this is Kathy Martin, and thank you for showing. I love to see my videos. It's so exciting to take wildlife videos and see what you find on them. But, I'm wondering from the tunnels, I've heard on the, east side of Route 2 that there are bears. Can bears come through? Would you see bears coming through the wildlife tunnels?
Well, now, of course, we're all interested in this bear business.
Yeah, I have.
And we know that the male bears do wander widely, and I've seen bear scat in Concord, but on the other hand, the females and the are still on the other side of 495 apparently, and we don't have a true bear population yet that I don't know what the poor bears would eat. It's other than our stuff, because the mast, the mast is irregular, and I don't know. It seems like it would be a tough proposition for bears. Anyway, if they came, sure they would use. I mean, they're under people's decks. They use everything. I'm sure they would use the tunnels. And thank you, Kathy, for sharing. Kathy noticed that this presentation was going to be happening, and she offered her material, and she's had good results. I was delighted to see it and happy to share it.
It's really fun to take wildlife photography.
Isn't it fun?
Go out to your camera. Mine are standing up by the pond, and to go out there and see what was out there this week that I didn't see. And these animals, you think you've got a house that's sitting here and they're very tame, but there are all these coyotes and fisher cats and everything running around by it, which is great. Yeah.
You must have been thrilled to see those twin fawns nursing in that video.
Yes.
Yeah, those ones are amazing. I love the daylight pictures because you just get so much more detail. Quick plug for Gwen Loud's wildlife column. She does it monthly. It's a wonderful update to what's happening around Lincoln, and she loves photo and video submissions. So if you take any, please send them her way, and they'll get featured in our monthly column online. So Ron, we do have a question from Ira from the chat. Do you have any recommendations for a low-cost trail camera? Maybe just a couple tips for somebody who's getting started.
Well, the price range for the basic kinds of things, you can get a motion triggered camera for under $100 online. Then there's kind of a bulk of them in the $100-something. Now the market is hunters. That's why there are so many, so cheap, and so it's not like tree huggers like us that are supporting this industry particularly. But then I bought one that was a little to get the quote no glow, which has been successful and very much worth it for me. That is a Bushnell, and it costs a little bit more, but not like buying an expensive pair of binoculars or anything like that. So
that's great.
You can so if I were gonna do this with an idea that you don't want to, so when I first started, I was using those white flashes, and I said I felt kind of guilty about assaulting the nervous system of the animals. But somebody pointed out, well, there's lightning, so that was a little reassuring. But you really, of course, really want to ideally just surveil the animals without alarming them in any way. And the no glow seems to succeed at that, even with coyotes. Coyotes have been, for me, I don't know Kathy's obviously had no problem getting, but over the years, coyotes seem the most wary and aware of my equipment, or probably my smell or whatever, compared to, say, raccoons that don't seem to give a care. But they don't seem, the Bushnell advertising no glow, I can, as I sit here, can endorse it. Then I'm sure I don't even look at the kind of systems that will broadcast will put them online and put them on your desktop, because you've got the power consumption problem, and so I'm not, and I just don't mind going to check the cameras. Checking the camera has the downside that you're showing other people where it is. So if anybody was malicious about it, you show them where it is by your tracks in the snow or whatever. And so that's a downside. And I haven't found that the animals particularly minded whether I would been there or not, but I do try to have reasonably clean hands when I'm handling the equipment ever since I learned the hard way from having my cables chewed up years ago.
You know, if I can say camera, I have a Bushnell. This is my favorite one, and I somehow got lucky and got it set up right. I think they're really not easy. They've got a lot of settings, and you can go down there, you leave it out for a week or a couple of days, and you go down there and it's set wrong, and you have to look. Oh, I guess you set it at the beginning. There's a leaf blowing, and it's all got. It's not necessarily an easy thing to do. You get a few great photos, and I have another new one that I haven't got programmed right. It seems to have more settings than this. This one is maybe 2 years old, and the other one is 1 year old. But they have a lot of settings, and it's not the easiest thing to get it.
No,
all
it's not.
set up.
And I hoped to convey that with my, at the beginning of my slideshow, that there was a definite learning curve, and then that you never get to a point where everything goes just perfect, like you might assume from watching me show the best that I've ever gotten over the years. A lot can go wrong, but that's part of the fun. A lot can go wrong fly fishing too. It is a challenge.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Ron and Kathy. This is really wonderful. I'm gonna go to sleep with thinking of those playful otters. What a treat to have had in that pack of coyotes. So I think with that, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. And we look forward to seeing you at our next program. Have a good evening, everyone.